All right, so get this, that study about diet and lifespan, the one you sent in. Well, we're not talking mice here, folks. We're going to the dogs. A 2002 study, this in the Journal of the American Veterinary Medical Association, followed 48 Labrador retrievers. They followed them their whole lives.
It's really interesting about this study is that it wasn't just about, how long these dogs lived, but how they aged. Like imagine pushing back arthritis and other age-related stuff for our furry friends.
Oh, yeah, I'd sign up for that. How'd they do it? Did they, feed them some miracle superfood or what?
Well, not exactly. They used what's called calorie restriction. And this doesn't mean, depriving the dogs, but carefully controlling their food intake.
Okay, so let's break that down. The study used this paired feeding design. So they took litter mates, split them into two groups. One group, the control group, they eat freely, like most of our pampered pups probably do. The other group got 25% less food, same food, but 25% less. And they did this from just 8 weeks old for their entire lives.
And it's super important to note here that both groups received a nutritionally complete diet. So it wasn't about, skimping on essential nutrients, but really about studying the impact of calorie intake.
Got it. It's not what they ate, but how much. So what happened to these pups?
The results, they were pretty dramatic. The median lifespan for the control group was 11.2 years. But the dogs on the restricted diet, they lived a median of 13 years.
Hold on, wait. Median lifespan. Remind me what that means again.
Yeah, sure. The median lifespan basically means the age at which half of the dogs in each group had died. So it's a good, central measure, for comparison. Now, they didn't find a difference in maximum lifespan. So that's like the age of the absolute oldest dogs in each group. But the study size might have been too small for that.
That makes sense, yeah.
Yeah.
More research, always a good thing. But still 2 extra years with your best friend. That's huge.
Absolutely. And it's not just about more years. The dogs on the restricted diet also showed a delayed onset of chronic diseases, especially osteoarthritis.
Oh, wow. That's a big one for dog owners, right?
Yeah.
Arthritis really impacts a dog's life.
Exactly. The restricted dogs, they hit that 50% mark for needing osteoarthritis treatment much later, like 13.3 years old versus 10.3 for the control group. So that's like 3 more years of running around playing fetch, enjoying life.
3 more years of zoomies.
Yeah.
I love it. But did they just track their weight, or did they actually look at how their bodies were changing?
They went deeper than that. They used DESE scans to measure not just weight, but body composition too.
Yeah.
Fat versus lean mass.
Wait, hold on. DESE scans. Remind me what those are again.
Yeah, it stands for dual energy X-ray absorptiometry. It's a kind of scan uses low-dose X-rays to measure bone density, but it can also tell the difference between fat and lean tissue. So it gives a much better picture than just stepping on a scale.
Gotcha. So it's not about being skinny, but about keeping that healthy muscle right.
Yeah, exactly. And what they found was really interesting. So the restricted dogs, they were leaner throughout their lives, even though they were getting all the nutrients they needed. And they kept that lean muscle for longer too. Like late in life, both groups did start to lose lean mass, which is probably just part of aging, but it happened later in the restricted dogs.
Interesting. So is that maintaining muscle as you age? Is that something we see in humans too?
It is. Think about how important it is for, older folks to stay active and keep their strength. It's not just about how you look, it's about overall health. And it seems like there are some parallels with our furry friends there.
So it's not just living longer, it's aging gracefully, huh? Whether you're a human or a Labrador.
Yeah.
But wasn't there something about their blood work too?
Yes. They found that the dogs on the restricted diet had lower levels of some things in their blood. Triglycerides, the T3 hormone, insulin, and glucose.
Okay, so break that down for me. What's the significance there? What does that tell us about aging?
So think of these as clues, to how well the body is working, especially when it comes to metabolism and aging. For example, high triglycerides, those are a type of fat found in the blood. Those are linked to heart disease, which is a common issue as we age. And T3, that's a thyroid hormone, and we tend to see levels of that decline with age.
Yeah, I've heard about thyroid problems becoming more common as people get older.
Right. And then there's insulin, which is super important for regulating blood sugar. As we age, our bodies can become less sensitive to insulin, which can lead to a whole bunch of problems. And high glucose, well, that's a path to all sorts of health issues.
Makes sense. So finding lower levels of these in the restricted dogs is a pretty good sign then, huh?
Exactly. It suggests a slower aging process and a healthier metabolism. And what's really cool is that this research in dogs lines up with what we're seeing in human studies on aging and calorie restriction too.
So maybe there is something to this calorie restriction idea, huh? Even for us humans. But before we go any further, I think it's really important to say that these dogs weren't being starved.
Oh, absolutely not. They got 75% of what their siblings ate, which is, still a good amount of food. And the diet was designed to make sure they were getting all the nutrients they needed.
There's a good takeaway here for all the dog lovers out there. The researchers recommend keeping your dog at a body condition score less than 5 for the best health and longevity.
Yeah. They used a scale of 1 to 9, with 1 being emaciated and 9 being, well, let's just say very round.
So you want to be able to feel your dog's ribs without a thick layer of fat, and they should have a visible waist when you look at them from above. It's about that healthy balance, But of course, every dog is different.
Absolutely. Always best to talk to your vet for advice about your dog's diet and weight. They can take into account, their breed, their age, how active they are and all that to make a plan that's right for them.
Good advice. So it seems like there's a lot to learn from this study, but where do we go from here? Should we all be cutting our dog's food by 25%?
Well, not so fast. This study is really interesting, but there are a few things to think about. First, this research was done on Labrador retrievers.
So we can't assume that these same benefits would apply to all breeds, right?
Exactly. I mean, think about the difference between a tiny Chihuahua and a Great Dane, right? Their needs are totally different. And then there are breeds that are prone to certain health issues.
This raises a good question, actually. What about other species? Like, could calorie restriction work for cats, too?
That's a great question, and one that researchers are looking into. We're just starting to understand how calorie restriction might affect different animals.
Well, it definitely gives us a lot to think about.
Yeah.
But before we get carried away with, extending our pets' lives forever, we need to remember that aging is natural. We can't stop it. But maybe, just maybe, we can find ways to help our dogs age more gracefully.
Absolutely. And this study gives us some good clues about how we might do that. It's about quality of life, not just quantity.
Well said. And speaking of quality, this study looked at starting calorie restriction early on when they were puppies. What if you have an older dog? Is it too late to make changes?
That's a really good question, and one that a lot of dog owners probably have. While starting early might have a bigger impact, it's never too late to focus on your dog's health. It's never too late, to start thinking about their health. Just like with us, humans making changes at any age can make a difference.
So even if my dog's, already a senior citizen in dog years, it's still worth talking to my vet about their diet.
Absolutely. Your vet can, assess your dog's condition, see, adjustments to their diet might be a good idea. They can help you figure out if calorie restriction is right for them, and if so, you know how to do it safely.
That makes sense. It's got to be, personalized, not just some one-size-fits-all thing.
Exactly. Every dog's different, and what works for one might not work for another. Just like you wouldn't expect a marathon runner to eat the same as someone who, sits at a desk all day.
So even if, changing their diet later in life doesn't, dramatically extend their lifespan, it could still improve their quality of life.
Exactly. Think about it this way. If you started, eating healthier and exercising more today, would it magically undo years of, not so healthy habits? Probably not. But it would probably make you feel better overall and maybe help prevent some health problems down the road.
I see what you mean. It's about, making those positive changes whenever you can.
Exactly. And it's not just about diet either. There are so many things that contribute to a long, healthy life for our pets. Regular exercise, keeping their minds active, a loving home, and of course, regular vet checkups.
So this calorie restriction study is super interesting, gives us a lot to think about, but it's not like a magic bullet.
It's really about, taking a holistic approach to their well-being, working with your vet to give them the best care, throughout their lives.
Well said. It reminds me of something you mentioned earlier, that connection between this research with dogs and what we see in humans. Is there anything more you can tell us about that? That's pretty intriguing.
Absolutely. There's a growing amount of research in humans that's looking at, the potential benefits of calorie restriction, or they often call it caloric restriction in those studies. And while more research is definitely needed, there's some evidence that suggests that, reducing calories without, cutting out essential nutrients might have positive effects on lifespan and health span in humans too.
Health span? What's that?
Oh, that's a great question. Health span refers to the period of life that a person or animal is healthy and free from chronic disease. So it's not just about living longer, but about living those extra years in good health, with vitality and a good quality of life.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's about extending the time where we're not just surviving, but actually thriving.
Exactly. And that's what's so exciting about this research, you know. It suggests that we might be able to influence not just how long we live, but how well we age, both for ourselves and for our furry friends.
Now, while we're on the topic of, like, the connection to human research, I think it's important to address something that some listeners might be thinking about. Calorie restriction might be one thing for dogs, but some people might be concerned about the ethical part of intentionally, restricting a dog's food.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
That's a really important point and a really important discussion to have. I think first and foremost, any decision about a dog's diet should always involve talking to a veterinarian to make sure it's done safely and ethically. And it's important to stress that calorie restriction as it was studied here. It's not about deprivation or starvation. It's about providing a carefully controlled diet that gives the dog all the nutrients they need while also moderating calorie intake.
So it's about finding that balance right, giving them enough calories for energy and growth, but not so much that it leads to weight gain and maybe health problems later on.
Exactly. And you have to remember that every dog is an individual. What might be an appropriate level of calorie restriction for one dog could be harmful to another. That's why working with a vet is so important. They can assess your dog's individual needs, monitor their progress and adjust things as needed.
That makes a lot of sense. It's not about just following some strict rule. It's about, personalized care.
Yeah.
Always thinking about what's best for your dog.
Exactly. And let's be clear, this research isn't saying that every dog should be on a calorie-restricted diet. There's a lot to consider, and it's a decision that should be made, in consultation with a vet who understands your dog's health history and individual needs.
Right. And let's not forget, this was just one study. More research is always needed to confirm and expand on these findings.
Absolutely. It's a valuable piece of the puzzle, but just one piece.
And speaking of this particular study, I'm curious about something. Earlier, we talked about how they use those DXA scans to measure body composition, which is pretty cool. But how did they figure out how much to reduce the food for the calorie-restricted group? Was it just a random number, or was there like a scientific reason for that 25% reduction?
That's a great question. It wasn't random at all. They calculated, the calorie needs of the dogs in the control group based on, their age, weight, activity level, and all that. Then they reduced the calories for the restricted group by 25%, but they made sure the diet still had all the essential nutrients.
So it's like a calculated reduction, not just a guess.
Exactly. And they kept a close eye on the dogs throughout the study to make sure they were maintaining a healthy weight and body condition.
Makes sense. It's all about that balance, right? Enough calories for energy and growth, but not too many that it leads to weight gain and potential problems down the line.
Exactly. And it really highlights the importance of, paying attention to our dog's weight and body condition throughout their lives.
So how can our listeners actually do this? What are some things they can do to assess their dog's body condition and figure out if maybe they need to make some changes to their diet?
There are a few things they can do. First, familiarize yourself with that body condition score chart we talked about. That chart gives you some visual guidelines, for assessing your dog's body condition based on how they look and how easily you can feel their ribs and spine.
Right. That 1 to 9 scale where 5 is ideal. Too thin is just as bad as being overweight.
Exactly. You want to be able to feel their ribs with a light touch, but they shouldn't be sticking out. And your dog should have, a visible waist when you look at them from above.
Any other visual cues they should be looking for?
Yeah. Look at your dog's overall shape. A healthy dog should have a tucked up abdomen, not a rounded or distended belly. And their chest should be wider than their abdomen.
So if they're starting to look a little sausage shaped, that might be a sign to adjust the diet.
That's one way to put it. And remember, it's not just what you see. Pay attention to your dog's energy levels and behavior. If they're lethargic or not wanting to exercise or gaining weight, even though they're eating the same amount, those could be signs that something's up.
So just be observant and, proactive when it comes to their health. Of course, any concerns, talk to your vet.
Absolutely. They're our partners in keeping our furry friends happy and healthy.
Well said. This has been a really interesting deep dive into the world of, dog years, and I think we've learned some really valuable stuff. But before we wrap up, I have one more question that I bet a lot of listeners are wondering about. This study focused on how calorie restriction affects lifespan and health span in dogs. But what about the emotional side of things? Some people might be thinking if I restrict my dog's food, won't they be hungry all the time and unhappy? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And it gets to the heart of how we connect with our dogs. I think it's natural to worry about whether they'll, feel deprived if we change their diet.
Yeah, we don't want them to feel like they're missing out.
Well, the good news is dogs don't experience food the same way we do. They don't have that same kind of like emotional connection to food, and they're not as driven by cravings or, the need for variety.
So it's not like they're just staring at the empty bowl feeling sad.
No, not at all. As long as they're getting, all the nutrients they need and a balanced diet, most dogs do just fine with changes to how much they eat.
Okay, that's good to know. But what about those pups who are like used to getting treats or, table scraps? Won't they like make a fuss if we cut those back?
It's true. Some dogs might take a bit to adjust, especially if they're used to getting extras.
Like mine, who thinks he deserves a piece of everything I eat.
Yeah, I think we've all been there. But the key is to be consistent and patient. Just like with any training, it takes time for them to learn new habits.
So no more sneaking them pizza under the table, huh?
Probably best to avoid that. But you can show them love in other ways, Spend time playing with them, going for walks, giving them lots of cuddles and attention.
But those are the best treats anyway. But let's switch gears a bit and talk about this study itself. We've covered a lot, but were there any limitations to this research?
Well, there are always limitations to any study, right? And this one is no exception. One thing to remember is that the sample size, while it was pretty big for a study like this, it could have been bigger.
Right. More dogs, more data makes the findings stronger.
Exactly. And even though they tried to control for other things, there's always a chance that something else might have affected the results.
Like, individual genes or even little differences in their environment.
Exactly. Science is rarely perfectly clear cut. It's about, building evidence over time with each study, adding more information.
Yeah, that's a good point. So we shouldn't just jump to conclusions from one study.
Right. This study gives us valuable information, but it's important to look at the bigger picture and talk to experts who can help us, understand the findings and how they apply to our own situations.
Which brings us back to, talking to your vet. They can help figure out what's right for your dog, taking into account their breed, their age, their health history, and, their lifestyle.
I completely agree. And let's not forget to give credit where it's due. Big shout out to the researchers who spent years on the study. Their work has really opened up new possibilities for understanding aging and the potential benefits of calorie restriction.
Absolutely. It's because of their hard work that we're even having this conversation.
Yeah.
They've given us a glimpse into maybe a future where we can not only extend our dogs' lives, but make those years better too.
And that's definitely something worth celebrating, right? Imagine our furry friends, enjoying more active, pain-free years with us.
It's a great thought, and it gives us hope for even more advancements in veterinary medicine and how we understand aging. So as we wrap up this deep dive into diet and longevity, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from this? What can they do, today to make their dog's life better, not just longer, but better?
I think just take a moment to think about, their diet, their exercise, their mental stimulation. Are there any areas where you could make some improvements? Even small changes can make a big difference in their overall health and happiness.
And remember, it's never too late to start, putting their well-being first. And who knows, maybe by using some of these insights from this study and, talking to your vet, you can give your furry friend the gift of a longer, healthier, and happier life with you.
That's a wonderful thought to end on, I think. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of dog years. Until next time, keep those tails wagging.